This video lecture addresses governance and adaptive management. How do we move from adaptive management used in our decisions to adaptive policy making and then adaptive governance? In other words, how do we ensure that our decision will be implemented? How do we create a project or policy that our decision makers want to implement, want to fund? How do we make policies that work? Adaptive policy making is an extension of the adaptive management approach and a relatively new aspect of adaptive governance. Experience demonstrates that policies designed implicitly or explicitly to operate within a certain range of conditions are often faced with challenges outside of that range. The result is that many policies have unintended impacts and do not accomplish their goals. Therefore, in order to help policies help people, policymakers need ways to design policies that can adapt to a range of anticipated and unanticipated conditions. The use of the adaptive management approach can help to achieve this. As an example, climate change introduces huge unknowns for policymaking. We know that the globe is warming, that typical precipitation patterns will change, and floods and droughts will become more common and more severe. But the precise nature of the impacts and their extent remain, and will always remain, impossible to predict. Increasing our capacity to cope with this dynamic future is imperative. Public policies can help build this capacity. However, a key challenge is developing policies that are robust enough to be useful in a rapidly changing and uncertain future. Designing policies in a world of uncertainty, change, and surprise is a challenge facing policymakers in all sectors. These challenges can be met by designing policy at the local, state, and federal level. Such policies should be able to adapt to both anticipated and unanticipated conditions. When adjusting to anticipated conditions, we may employ no regrets policies and automatic adjustment based on triggers and actions. When adjusting to unanticipated conditions, perhaps most importantly, principles for intervening in complex adaptive systems yield many insights for improving policy adaptations to unanticipated conditions, as do structured learning processes such as scheduled policy reviews and readjustments. Certainly, our environmental policy process could benefit from adaptive policymaking. Particularly important would be the evaluate step, that is, being able to make course corrections in the policy as new data reveal results or impacts. Instead, we typically make policy and walk away. The only corrections to policies that are not working are to create entirely new ones, which is not exactly an effective, efficient way of doing business. Interestingly enough, some suggest that the bureaucracy as an entity tends to favor long-term answers, such as adaptive management, that takes time to avoid having to make a decision that might not be popular. As Walters, 1997, said, quote, "Bureaucratic and political decision-makers often face a nasty choice between acting decisively to initiate substantial policy change, major restrictions of users, investment in restoration, conduct of large risky management experiments, or waiting to see if the problem of the day will correct itself naturally or be resolved through research. It is wrong to assume that decisive action is the optimum choice for such people, whatever the weight of objective evidence about the urgency of action." Decisive action generally has immediate and obvious costs, ranging from loud outcries from affected economic interest groups to the risk of embarrassment if the policy does not perform as expected. On the other hand, the costs of inaction are seldom so immediate. There may be louder outcries from some interest groups, but these can often be alleviated by pointing out that delay allows more time for research and careful planning. Further ecological problems often do correct themselves. For example, recruitment failures originally attributed to overfishing may actually have been due to unfavorable environmental conditions for juvenile survival. For many decision makers, even a short delay can be enough to ensure that someone else will have to make the decision. It should not surprise us at all to see a remarkable range of excuses used to delay the difficult decisions needed to implement a significant program of experimental management. In situations in which inaction or delay is the rational choice for decision makers, proponents of experimental management face a very difficult choice. Accept the delay and hope for some natural event to create a more visible crisis that cannot be ignored. Or enter the political arena and try to make inaction more costly, at least more embarrassing, via public information, advocacy for legislation requiring change, or even threat of legal action. These are difficult choices, especially for responsible managers and scientists who have become advocates of adaptive management through careful analysis, and who assume that results of the analysis will be used rationally by equally responsible decision makers. It is not my intention to suggest that responsible scientists and managers should become political advocates for experimental management, but we should understand that, in many situations, it is a waste of time to invest further effort in developing more precise and rational justifications that will simply fall on deaf ears. We should also understand just how large and perilous a step it is from analysis to advocacy." End quote. Walters, 1997, also notes that, quote, "The critical need today is not better ammunition for rational debate, but creative thinking about how to make management experimentation an irresistible opportunity, rather than a threat to various established interests." That is, we need to show that actively adaptive management can create win-win outcomes for scientists, bureaucratic administrators, politicians, and resource environment interest groups. Almost every adaptive management planning exercise has at least hinted at the existence of such outcomes, usually in the form of diagnostic probes or field trials that provide a wealth of clear responsive information without commitment to any permanent change in management strategy." End quote. In summary, adaptive management is a tool that can be used for many situations where there exists uncertainty, including environmental projects, policies, and governance. The value of policy could be greatly enhanced if it were more flexible or adaptable to changing conditions. Yet adaptive management cannot be implemented without support from above, needing agreement from the bureaucracy to proceed with a decision. It is here that practitioners of adaptive management must focus their efforts to show the value of this process in a way that makes it an irresistible opportunity for those in governance. The following reference was consulted in developing this video lecture.